Alright, so while I was laying down last night, pretending like I was going to be able to fall asleep at a decent hour, I was turned on Adam and Sitch's stream, like I usually do on Sunday nights, and they were talking about morality with Doomerpolitics. And just an aside, Adam and Sitch are, if you've never checked out their stream, I highly encourage you to do so. They stream about 10 to 12 hours every week, give or take. And Adam has a stream on Thursday as well that he does. Both are incredibly fun streams to watch. Both are incredibly educational. Doomerpolitics, he's kind of, well, for me, he's kind of a newcomer. I actually don't know how long he's been around. He just came out with that Vosh is Evil video. Without a doubt, probably the best takedown I've seen on YouTube of someone. Normally, I agree with Adam Sitch on most things, but morality is one place where I've just never agreed with them. It's not that I necessarily think that they're entirely wrong or anything. I think that a lot of times they get lost in the details, and maybe I do too. I don't know. I'm just like anyone else. I'm fumble through this life trying to find my way, trying to make sense of the world that I live in, trying to understand why we do what we do. And Doomerpolitics gives a definition of morality that I feel it's flawed. What I want to do with this video is just, kind of watch this video. I'll maybe criticize their arguments as we go along. And then I'll discuss my worldview of morality and the implications that I think it holds.
I think Doomer's pretty smart too, obviously.
Doomer is very smart because he agrees with us, so he must be very smart.
Doomer, real quick, because we argue a lot about objective morality, and you have an interesting position on morality.
Poor Sitch. Terrified. He's got another Sargon situation on his hands, I think. Yeah, Sargon and Sitch and Adam and Mahler argued about morality for I don't know, 3 hours the other week or last week. I don't remember which week. They all blurred together, and it was entertaining, but not very productive in my opinion.
I don't want to go. I don't want to argue about it, but his position, I think, might be my position, and I don't necessarily know it.
Okay, I'm almost positive that you're correct. Okay, so I'll explain this with an analogy. I'm going to take this away, but it'll make sense why. So there's all these arguments about,
sorry.
there's all these arguments about whether art has objective or subjective value. And these endless, incredibly stupid, obnoxious arguments.
Wait, when you say, you mean value or like criteria?
Like value, like basically, what are you allowed to say that a movie is good or not? Is basically
okay. I wouldn't say value. I'd say that's a criteria of whether something is good. Okay.
I think Sitch may have misunderstood his point here. What Doomerpolitics is talking about is a value judgment that you ascribe to something. You would synthesize all these different value judgments that you have about this movie into kind of a cohesive argument for whether or not you think the movie is good. I think Sitch is a little more focused on the specific criteria that would make a movie good. So he's calling it a criteria, but technically they're value judgments. Both of these things are the same thing. So kind of definitional.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So just to walk through all the different levels, if something only has subjective value, that would basically mean that if I explained why I liked a movie, that wouldn't have any influence on whether or not you liked the movie.
Okay.
True. This is absolutely true. And this is something Haidt covers a little bit in his Righteous Mind book. A big aspect of our moral reasoning is actually attempting to convince other people to agree with us. Even, when we're thinking about why we like something, a lot of the time, even unknowingly, we're thinking of ways to make other people like it as well. Or hate it.
My value judgments are limited to me, and they don't even get to you. And philosophy, it's like they don't cross the agent barrier. It's like they can't actually be communicated. I could tell you why I like the movie, but my statements would lack substance, which sounds like a ridiculous position because it is a ridiculous position. People who argue this position almost universally don't understand the implications of what they're saying.
And the implications are pretty bad because it basically means that there's nothing binding humanity together. And if you follow subjective morality long enough, to its inevitable conclusion, you're going to have a societal collapse. People are going to be disposable the second they're not needed anymore.
Because obviously that isn't the case. If I like something, then people with similar taste to me are going to be more likely to like it, right? That's just, I don't know how people disagree with that. And then when you talk about the objective value of a film, you get into a problem because if a film had objective value, basically what you're saying is that if you talk to God, God would have a list of all of the films in order from best to worst.
Yeah. I don't think this is the problem that Doomerpolitics thinks it is. If there were a God, and I'm not going to get too much into theology. This isn't an unreasonable expectation to have. I think I understand where he's going. He's saying that you couldn't possibly do this for humanity, but you could. It just not everyone would agree on it. You could average all of this out and make a list from these averages. So you technically could do it. I don't know why you would want to, and I don't know what the purpose would be, but you could. If you wanted to, you could decide what humanity's favorite movies are and rank them. And obviously, this list is going to change over time.
Or something like, you could say something about a film that would, it would have the same effect on trees and rocks as it had on people.
Yeah, I don't think this is a fair critique of objective morality. When we talk about objective morality, I don't think anybody's talking about morality that applies to rocks or trees or even animals. Objective morality is pretty much understood to only apply to humanity, or at the very least, intelligent life.
Or something like that. Or like, this movie is so good that even if we met aliens, the aliens would like this movie more than we like it, right? And that's also a ridiculous position.
Yeah, maybe. I would imagine the aliens would like whatever movies fit their own societies and cultures. But I don't know that this is exactly the point he thinks it is, because the issue I have with it is that we really don't know with aliens. We don't know. My assumption would be that if there are intelligent alien species, they're probably going to have value systems incredibly similar to ours. It's difficult to imagine an alien species that thinks it's okay to just kill your own neighbor whenever they want and have a coherent, cohesive society. It's difficult to imagine an alien species supporting, stealing other people or stealing other aliens' properties. Let me be more specific. It's difficult to imagine an alien species that would see the betrayal by one of its own to be a moral good.
It's nonsensical.
What's the movie?
That feels like it kind of falls into the trap of local versus universal.
No. Yeah, local versus. We'll move past that. They moved past it pretty quick.
Objectivity.
Oh no!
No. So where I'm going is intersubjectivity. Mm-hmm. So intersubjective truth is truth that is subjective insofar as it's limited to people, but it's shared between people. So like whether or not a movie is good, basically it has value because movies are something that exist in society that are created for people. And sort of the aggregate response to a movie would have intersubjective value because people have ideas about these things that are connected. And that's why we can have media criticism. I can give you my reasons that I like a movie and
Sure.
You might agree, and it might affect the way that you think about the movie. It's because our experiences are connected, but that doesn't necessarily mean that God thinks this is the best movie.
Yeah. I understand.
I don't think that this kind of statement is HUDs with objective morality. Obviously, tastes are going to differ. I fucking hate broccoli, for example. You're not going to get me to eat it. I mean, I'll eat a cucumber. I'll eat a tomato. But my dad, he wouldn't touch a tomato. So tastes differ from person to person. And I don't necessarily think that this is purely a moral thing. Some of this is like cultural norms, which have their roots in morality, but aren't technically morality. Take, for example, cultures where you take your shoes off before you go into a person's house. Well, in some cultures, if you didn't do this, that person would feel like you just completely disrespected them. But it still boils down to disrespect. So pointing out that, like Americans don't require this isn't, well, most Americans don't require this isn't actually a critique of objective morality, because there is a situational aspect to this, unless you're coming at it from a moral absolutist, which I don't know that I would. At the end of the day, we're talking about respect. That's the shared morality. That's the objective part.
Yeah, and like every time I explain this, everyone has always agreed. It just seems so obvious. Yeah, of course. There's meaningful value. You can say movies are better than other movies, but it only really has, it only really means something in the context of people talking to each other. Mm-hmm. So that's basically how I think about morality.
Yeah, I don't think he's totally wrong. I think he's trying to bridge this gap between objective morality and subjective morality when it doesn't need to be bridged. And I think that he's falling into the trap that I think a lot of people do, even like, moral philosophers and moral psychologists. And, maybe this is a problem on my definitions. It's very possible. But I don't think that, different traditions and different cultural norms and stuff prove that objective morality isn't real. Because, I mean, again, at the end of the day, they're still, like, the purpose of all of these things is to try and get us closer to fulfilling some value, some moral value. And these moral values are universal. I can't think of a society where betrayal is seen as good, or where loyalty to your in-group is seen as bad. I can't think of a society where, they don't really care if you kill people. They might think it's okay to kill some people, but there is an agreement. Murder for the sake of murder is bad. This is objective across humanity. There's no disagreement here unless that person is psychotic or, has some other kind of mental illness, which, is a mental illness. It means that something isn't working right.
Is that I don't think that we could come up with like a set of morality that would be best for aliens, or a set of morality that would be best for rocks, or a set of morality where if we were to meet God or, 5-dimensional super people, that they would necessarily have to agree with it.
Probably not. I don't think you could. At least not very easily and not quickly. That people are pretty rooted in their traditions, and it's going to be difficult to convince them to give up traditions that may not be fulfilling the moral good that they think it is. With that said, I actually do think that you could come up with a moral system that is, for all intents and purposes, perfect. You could theoretically do it. I don't think anybody alive can do it. Maybe if there is a God, he can do it. There's always going to be a best case outcome. And while it's not always easy to see what that outcome is, it's undeniable that if we were to if we, had all the knowledge in the world and, completely understood every culture and every tradition, that with time and the cooperation of humanity, that we couldn't come up with a system that, could fit pretty much most cultures in the world, barring, some geopolitical things. But here's the thing, and this is probably my biggest issue with those who critique objective morality, is that they tend to fall back on contingencies, but these contingencies are baked in. You can't erase the contingency from the moral. Killing isn't always wrong, you're correct. But murder is, and we all agree on that. It's unjust, so we all agree that unjust killing is incorrect. We all agree that you shouldn't betray your country. Well, I wish we all agreed on that. Most of us agree on that. And we all agree that at the end of the day, we want to make the world a better place. And this is and this is where I hate, the political divide, is because I really believe that conservatives and liberals both want this. They're just coming at it from, and progressives and libertarians and whatever other political category you want to throw in there, they're just coming at it from completely different perspectives, completely different moral foundations, if you will. By the way, thank you, Adam. Everyone is trying to achieve these virtues and trying to make a more virtuous society. There are differences in opinion, obviously. So I'm not saying that that the behaviors are always congruent with a perfect morality within these societies. I'm just saying that pretty much every society out there agrees on a set of virtues. Different moral systems develop, but they all rest upon an underlying sense of objective morality. That would be my argument here, is that sure, there are disagreements, and traditions sometimes may not actually fulfill these virtues that we're trying to achieve, but the attempt is there, and all of these societies are set up, and all moral rules from these societies are set up to fulfill these virtues. The problem is, though, and this is where I do agree with Doomerpolitics, is that's never going to happen. You're never going to be able to create a perfect system because we can barely even manage our own countries. We barely even understand the impacts of the policies that we put in place here. So, I would agree that humanity is in no position where it could make this kind of ruling. I do completely agree with that. I just don't agree that there isn't an objective aspect to morality. And even if we want to start thinking of it in an intersubjective way, which I do think there might be some benefit to, in hindsight. I was completely against it when he first said it. I still think we have to come to an agreement that there is an objective component to it.
But at the same time, we can absolutely find moral rules that are that lead us in the direction of an optimal society, and it has truth value between people. Mm-hmm. So like you said, I have sort of an interesting position. I'm what's called a moral fictionalist, which basically means that moral anti-realist insofar as I am skeptical of objective morality. I haven't been convinced, you could put it that way. But
fair enough. And if you ever do come across this video, I doubt it'll convince you. The arguments sound a lot more salient in my head, but I don't always do a very good job portraying them in a video, unfortunately.
But something like objective morality, I think, is completely necessary. It's what's called a useful fiction. Basically, even if this isn't real, we should pretend that it is, because it is so useful. We have to have this.
Sure, I'll concede that point. Even if I'm totally wrong here, even if you're totally wrong, even if we are both totally wrong about our conceptualizations of morality, for the sake of society, we have to pretend that there is some kind of objective standard that we're trying to reach.
So my take on morality is basically that we don't need to be discovering objective rules that would like apply to alien civilizations. All we need to care about is what would be best for people on our planet. What are the rules that make sense for us, given our history and the way that we interact and what we observe to be human nature, or however it is that you want to phrase that.
Fair enough, but I don't think objective moralists are really thinking about aliens. I really don't know that that's a critique.
So it's not an objective morality. It's an intersubjective morality, right? It's
right.
We are agreeing on rules that we think are going to maximize some outcome, maximize well-being or minimize suffering or do something like that. And yeah, I mean, that's basically my take.
You still have to choose the goal.
Yeah, exactly.
I think evolution shows that goal. Or, God, if there is one. But I don't really think that these two things are incompatible. I think if you do believe in God, I think it's still possible to believe that he would have set the evolution in motion that would result in these virtues that we're trying to achieve.
Exactly. You always have to choose a goal, and people can choose whatever goal they want. But most people are going to agree. It's like, you want to maximize well-being, you want to minimize suffering. And then people, everyone's going to have their own goals on top of that. But at least we can agree on stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's some in total agreement. At the end of the day, whether morality is objective or intersubjective, it really doesn't actually make a difference. Because both moral objectivists and moral intersubjectivists have the same goal here. It's to try to, develop moral systems and, political policies that produce.
But how do you do that? Utilitarianism. The guy wants.
Every form of government is utilitarianism. I don't care what anyone says. I'll stand by it. Every form of government is utilitarianism. Every form of government is designed to make a cohesive society. Now, I get that there's a lot of nuance to this discussion. That's fair enough. But when it comes to morality, I think it's fair enough to say that we need to be utilitarian with it.
Walks into the hospital.
Adam,
I hate that.
Adam, you realize that what he said is the exact thing that I've said a million times. He just used different words.
I like the way he says it better, though. He has these fancy.
Sorry, Sitch, I do too. He was a little more persuasive. I was completely at odds with what you were characterizing it as. Love you though.
Words like intersubjective truth and moral fictionalism.
Okay, well,
Sitch, why didn't you ever teach me about moral fictionalism?
All he's doing is he's using, when I say universal objective, he's just saying objective. When I say locally objective, he's just saying intersubjective. That's the only difference. We have the exact same position.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of the obvious position.
It's
interesting to me that it's interesting to me that anyone disagrees with it. But so that's why I started this by saying
maybe I'm an idiot. I don't know, but I disagree with it.
Oh God, this conversation could be annoying because you just get into arguing about semantics, and usually this just gets hard.
Ah, fuck. Is that what happened here? Did we completely agree and we just got into a semantic disagreement? Is that what happened? Did I misunderstand?
On something, yeah.
That was me and Adam used to argue about objective morality every stream for a year, and it was all Sitch's law.
Miscommunication.
It was all just the definition of how you define the word objective.
I DM'd Adam during the Sargon debate. I'm pretty sure I can clear this up. And I was basically just going to say what I just said.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure if I had said that, everybody would have agreed.
No.
Yeah, no. No, Sargon wouldn't have agreed. Sargon wasn't going to agree with anyone in that debate. But after a few minutes of it, I think that people were going to firmly establish their positions and just completely oppose the other side. It was pretty nasty at times.
I wouldn't have cleared.
Well,
it
I
up.
don't know how relevant
So
that
you
was
don't
to
think
the
Sargon would've?
Sargon conversation.
Yeah, it's also not really relevant. I don't think the Sargon. I mean, there is always you can't get away from it. There is always a component of it that is objective. You know, when you talk about these conversations, but it's more about the criteria by which we should judge these moral systems.
In the beginning, it seemed pretty relevant. It wasn't relevant towards the end, but I kind of tapped out. I
well, no, because
I stopped tracking it at some point.
His original position was you can just make an argument that appeals to people's moral
Intuitions,
aesthetics. And I was like, oh, you can do that. I don't think that's very valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could. It's just the problem is people.
It works on some people, definitely. It's not going to work on everybody. It's definitely a very simplistic argument, and if you're trying to have an in-depth discussion about this, I don't really think that's a very helpful thing to add to it. I mean, I love Sargon, I really do, but I don't think that's fair to add. Anyway, they don't really say much more. So just to kind of summarize my position, I think there is an objective component to morality, but I think that we have to separate it from cultural norms and traditions and the way that we display these virtues. Whether you want to call it intersubjective, you know, all of this stuff, I think it would be fair to call this stuff intersubjective, while still calling these virtues that we pretty much all hold, aside from the rare exception, objective. I think that's an entirely fair position. I do think that there is a bridge to be made between objective morality and intersubjective morality, and I do think a lot of even my disagreements in hindsight probably do come down to definitions. So I think that's a lot of what's going on with morality. But I think the one thing that all of us would walk away from agreeing on is that subjective morality is fucking terrible.